From ya boy's bold but empty claims of winning it all to James Krause losing everything except the bet, here's a complete list of fighters that bet on themselves but lost. First up, Eryk Anders wants you to think of him as ya boy, as in, ya boy's gonna make you a lot of money if you bet on him to win. Anders enjoyed relative success as an amateur MMA fighter with a pretty steady fight record of 13-3-1. But the former linebacker got into the world of mixed martial arts pretty later on in his life. So while he'd always be admired as a guy who could possibly knock out his opponents, no one was really that keen on betting all their marbles on the guy, which, didn't sit well with him. Anders was pretty confident in his fighting strategy, often telling people he'd be the next middleweight champion one day. And that wasn't something he was hoping on. Yep, he was betting on it. So, when ya boy found out that he was marked as a 180 underdog in his bout against Junyoung Park at UFC Night 206, he released a statement telling bettors that he'd be placing $1,000 on himself and taking his guaranteed winning proceeds with him on a post-win drinking binge. His confidence was pretty admirable, if I'm being honest. So much so, actually, that his odds were upped. But he was still seen as the underdog, and I'm sure more than a few people bet on him winning with newfound hope. You know what they say, trust your gut? Because the guys who decided to trust ya boy over their initial instincts lost a lot of money that night. To Anders' credit, he lost the fight via split decision after a gruesome 3-round bout. He ended up winning against Kyle Daukaus just a few months later. But I have a feeling no one was willing to bet on the volatile prospect again. Okay, so next up, the time James Vick lost a lot of money. Okay, so humor me on this one. There's a fighter with a stellar lightweight record of 7-1. His only loss was against Beneil Dariush, which, come on, it's Dariush. Besides that, he's been making waves in the lightweight division and is favored to win every single one of his fights. Dana White eventually realizes the guy's star potential and books him for a headline event at UFC Fight Night 135. Would you bet on this guy? Sure you would. The guy I'm telling you about is James Vick, a former lightweight one-hit wonder. I actually mean that quite literally, and you'll get to know why in just a minute. So, UFC Fight Night 135 rolls over, and Vick's scheduled to take on Justin Gaethje. Gaethje's no underdog by any means, but bettors place Vick as the stronger contender for the bout. Everyone's betting on Vick, and even Vick's betting on Vick. Actually, Vick's been betting on himself for quite a while. The former lightweight claimed that he'd routinely bet on himself. Not extravagant amounts, but a few hundred here and there, probably to motivate himself to do better. Anyway, this time around, he actually placed a significant bet on himself to win, which he shouldn't have. One-hit wonder, right? Vick lost the bout in the first round via knockout, and that was pretty much the beginning of the end for him. Vick's winning streak came to an end, and he went on a losing one. Eventually, after 4 losses too many, the UFC released him from his contract in 2019. I can't really blame Vick and his supporters for betting on him here. He was, after all, favored to win, so it makes sense. But what possessed Justin James to bet on himself? No one will ever know. If you thought your life was hard, take a look at James's. The former lightweight fighter was on a 3-loss streak. He was up against one of the strongest contenders in the division, Charles Rosa. He bet his entire purse. That's $25,000 on himself winning the bout, despite being the underdog. He even released a pretty passionate video on Instagram and captioned it, "Believe in yourself," okay? And then he lost the fight, lost his entire fight purse, and was let go from the UFC on his birthday. It's a case of anything that could go wrong, did go wrong. But seriously, it's somewhat difficult to find compassion for James when you think of the fact that the guy was consistently told he had to do a lot more than just run his mouth if he wanted to win. James told everyone in his video that he was thankful for his supporters and critics. More so the critics because apparently the negative energy was helping him focus. He said that people had been reaching out to him, asking him to renege on his bet, maybe just bet some money on himself, and not all of it. But nope. The former lightweight contender said he didn't give a what anyone had to say. He believed in himself, his coaching staff, and the MMA gods above, that he'd win. Would have made for a pretty inspirational tale had he not lost. Jane's loss wasn't a shock, but it was gut-punching, figuratively and literally, because Rosa punched him in the gut a few times to really add insult to injury, and just when you think things couldn't get worse, they did. James tested positive for a banned substance a few days later, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission suspended him for 6 months. He was set to return in November 2021, but the UFC announced in June that they'd parted ways with the fighter. Did you know Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor have also betted on themselves? Poirier currently reigns supreme in the lightweight division, sitting comfortably at number 2 in all-time rankings. The Diamond's had a shining career in the promotion and has always been everyone's favorite to win, including his own. Recently, he revealed that he'd routinely bet on himself ahead of every fight, just to give himself more of a reason to win. Now, Poirier admitted to losing some of those bets too. He claimed that he's since humbled down and stopped betting on himself, but he still bets on other contenders from time to time. Could that be considered insider trading? I mean, no one knows UFC quite like the guy, right? No one besides Conor McGregor and him, that is. Does it really come as a surprise that McGregor's been betting on himself all these years? Yeah, it didn't surprise me either. What was a bit shocking, though, was Dana White's admission that the Notorious would actually bet with high-level executives. He once placed $3 million on himself to win against Charles Mendes. The Irishman won, so kudos to him for that, but I have a feeling he wouldn't really delve into information on the bets he's lost on himself anytime soon. Sports betting has long been controversial, but it's pretty rampant in the MMA, and if you couldn't tell already, fighters even bet on themselves. But all that's since changed. The UFC just announced that fighters and close family and friends couldn't place bets anymore. I might have meant it as a joke when I called it insider trading, but the UFC's recently taken stricter action against betting. Hunter Campbell, UFC's chief business officer, sent out a letter in 2022 citing that all fighters, their coaching staff, and anyone close to them have been banned from placing bets on major octagon bouts. UFC noted that it had to change its policy to fall in line with regulators responsible for the regulated sports betting industry in the United States. This might probably have something, if not everything, to do with the James Krause scandal. Krause might have won the bet, but lost everything else while he was at it. You've probably heard of him, if not from his brief stint on The Ultimate Fighter, or from World Extreme Cage Fighting, or his short-lived but successful career as a welterweight fighter in the UFC, then you'd probably know him as the guy who lost everything because of a bet. On 5 November 2022, a handful of UFC oddsmakers and media members noticed suspicious gambling activity. This was before a fight between Shailen Nordembeka and Derek Minner in Las Vegas. Minner was one of Krause's students at Glory MMA and Fitness. The guy was largely favored to win the bout in the days leading up to the fight. But just a few moments before, everyone surprisingly withdrew their bets from Minner and placed them on Shailen. Why? Well, according to US Integrity, someone had revealed that Minner couldn't win the fight because of his bad knee. Now, Minner could have had the option to opt out of the fight and would have been rescheduled without much cause. Instead, several sources claim that Krause told him to power through, while also making money on the side by telling people the obvious outcome of the bout. Yup, Minner lost via technical knockout. Shocker, it was because he busted his knee pretty badly. The NSAC took away Krause's coaching license, and the UFC subsequently released a statement that anyone having trained with the former welterweight at his gym would not be allowed to compete in the promotion. Again, Krause won the bet, but he ended up having to sell his gym because of what he'd done to win. So, from James Krause losing everything except the bet to ya boy's bold but empty claims of winning it all. This was a list of UFC fighters who gambled on themselves and lost.